good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Current Events on Tap, a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project, where, like the drinks, the current events are on the house. And I'm your host, Alex Kirsch, pragmatic progressive, U.S. Army veteran, truck driver, gamer, and streamer. If this is your first time on the show, please do not forget to hit like, share, comment, and subscribe. Currently, I am streaming on YouTube, Twitch, and the X platform, hoping to expand to more platforms here in the near future. The format of this show is very simple. I bring on one or more guests, we talk beer or beverage of choice, and the current events of the week. Each person will discuss their beverage of choice for this hour, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, it really doesn't matter. Then each person will cover two current events of their choosing. They give the current event, they give their assessment, then each person gets a chance to give their assessment, and then we're going to discuss the issue. Debate may be possible, but rest assured, you are in a good faith zone, and you will get your chance to get your point across. The point of this space is for all of us to discuss the issues, what we think, and keep an open mind to what the other person has to say. But please remember to keep it within TOS. Now, let's welcome back to the show, without further ado, the Tyberius D. How you doing, Tiberius?
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's a busy day for me. I just had my renters or my tenants move into my old house up in my hometown. We got that settled in today. And I got your show today, and I got Doghouse's new show today, so I'm pretty well action-packed.
There you go.
Yeah, it's been quite a thing. But, yeah, thanks for having me back, man. If you want me to give an intro, I can give you a quick spiel.
Go for it.
Yeah, so my name is Tyberius D. I do a lot of different things. I'm basically a giant, just massive nerd. I can talk about Star Trek. I can talk about Star Wars. I can talk about 40K. I'm also a massive political nerd, but I'm, doing anything from streaming, chats like this with my good friend Alex here, to playing Warhammer and, basically taking the High Elves to victory in the great campaign of the Warhammer Fantasy Universe. I do a little bit of everything. I play City Skylines. I do all the stuff. So if you're just looking for a guy who can just nerd out or, is gonna, basically be the modern day Socrates of don't disturb my circles. Sorry, that's not Socrates. It's the guy that was at Syracuse. Archimedes. Yeah, your modern day Archimedes where he's just kind of fiddling with stuff, making sure it all works at, 90% efficiency or better. Yeah, I'm definitely that kind of guy. But anyway, it's great to be back. Thank you very much. I believe we were on the inaugural show.
Yes,
yeah,
you were. And I'm always happy to have back guests always, just like it's whoever's willing to come on here,
Well, I do appreciate the invite, but also it really seems like you've gotten yourself down. I've watched a couple of episodes here. I remember when Connor was on. I remember when Fairy Queen was on. There's a couple others there that I, wanted to check out. Unfortunately, I'm a busy beaver, so I didn't get a chance to watch all of them.
Yeah.
Yes, I do appreciate your show because it brings a levity that it's sorely missed in other shows that, I get invited to.
Absolutely. I mean, we were talking about that on the Minds of Ecclesia hosted by our friend Lethe, where some people just like to go ballistic, and I know that's one thing that you don't like. You like to have intellectual conversations where people aren't just going for the clickbait, not going for the clicks, Sometimes entertaining, but sometimes better just to have a conversation, talk about the issues. Even if we disagree on it, it can come down to a legitimately good conversation, and that's what I like to have here.
Yeah, it really comes down to me personally, where it's look, if you want to be flamboyant, boisterous, you want to throw some shade at people, sometimes it's appreciated because some people need to be called out. I don't know if you've seen me, but we might get into it a little bit. I've been railing on the Democrats for being the pro-democracy party, but then at the same time pretty much just kicking their primary process down the curve and acting like, oh, well, it's no big deal. We're just going to keep on going. I'm like, no, it's a bad look, guys. And I call it out the way I see it. So it's one of those deals where it gets a little fun. But yeah. I know me and you've kind of circled around the drain on that one before, but if we need to revisit that during the show, we can. But we've got 4 topics that we need to get into. So who's up first?
Well, first, before we go into our topics, let's talk about our beverages this evening. I'm just sticking with water tonight because I'm recovering from a cold. So it's just standard H2O. Got to stay hydrated. It's still pretty warm out. Really humid, especially in my neck of the woods. No pun intended. So, excuse me. So if I cough a little bit, I'm sorry. It's just I'm getting over this. I was going to work, just completely just dragging ass, and I hated it. And it's not like I couldn't call in sick, but it's because we were already shorthanded, and I knew that I couldn't call in sick. I'm sure the guys would have gotten through it, but it's just I feel better knowing that I got to work and did my part. So is what it is. So.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you got one of those jobs that you don't have a lot of contact with people. Face to face outside of just dropping off your forms and whatnot.
Well, I do nowadays because I'm a local driver, and I deliver infrastructure products like to new construction and whatnot, or to like other people's houses and stuff. So occasionally I might have to like get permission to come on their property and stuff like that, which there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, they might be expecting me, but some people are a little, they're very particular, especially like if they just had their road, their driveway redone and they don't want heavy equipment coming on there, then you gotta address it to higher. So I have a little bit more contact nowadays, but especially when I'm delivering windows and I need people to help me unload the windows because some of them bitches are heavy, like they're heavy as fuck. Yeah, like patio
windows
doors.
aren't light.
Yeah, patio doors and shit. Oh yeah, absolutely. So, but what you got for drinking tonight? Are you just like me being a sober bird?
Okay, so long and the short, if anyone doesn't remember me from the first episode, I don't drink alcohol largely because I become an asshole when I drink. So I purposely try to avoid that when at all possible. I don't get loosey-goosey. I get loosey-fighty. It's not good. Yep. I generally like to smoke personally. However, I went sober about 2 months ago because the employment that I had kind of went sideways on me, and I've been trying to get other employment, but a lot of them drug tests. So, until I cross that bridge on whether I can smoke or not, I've just been kind of annexing that. So when it comes to the drinkage, I actually just ran in the door, fired up the computer, so I haven't grabbed anything yet, but I'll either be enjoying some HTO myself, or I'll crack out a Dr. Pepper or two, depending on how it goes.
There you go. Nothing wrong with that, man. And, here's the thing. I mean, I usually just drink alcohol when I do this show, but it's not required because I know some people don't drink, which I respect wholeheartedly. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So, all right, let's go ahead and jump on these topics. As always, I'll just go first, and then you'll go next. Ready?
Go for it.
All right, so first topic, the Lincoln Project, an organization that's filled with moderates and former Republican Party members who oppose former President Trump, released a video, an advertisement of a cop pulling over a father and a daughter. It's called State Line. And the cop asks if the girl's name is Abigail after he gets the license and registration of the father. And then after he says, "Are you Abigail?" the father's like, "Yeah, how did you know that?" And he's like, "Is it true that you're 8 weeks pregnant?" And then the cop then also guesses and comes to the conclusion that they are traveling out of state to get an abortion because the father and daughter initially say, "We're on our way to go see her sister." He's like, "Oh, but your sister's at a concert, so how are you going to go see your sister if she's at a concert," kind of deal. And he says, "So you're going to go get an abortion at the nearest Planned Parenthood outside of the state." And she's like, "Well, we have a right to travel." And he says, "Not anymore." So they both get arrested. Now, some people are like, "Oh, that's a bit far-fetched." Is it far-fetched? It isn't. Because there's places like Texas that want to prevent Katie Cox, already a mother of two, from being able to have an abortion due to full trisomy 18, an extreme chromosomal abnormality. Now, had the baby actually come to term, it would have died within minutes or hours or even days. But still, the baby was gonna die. There's no other way to look at it. Now, they chose the merciful way out. But Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, decided to go full fash and say, "No, you don't get to have a choice in this regard." She ended up leaving the state, and I don't know if she ever went back to the state of Texas, but she actually ended up leaving the state and having the abortion. A 10-year-old grape victim, I have to say it like this for TOS purposes, was graped by a monster, and she lived in Ohio, and the state of Ohio was going to force her to actually have that child. She had to leave the state, and lawmakers, now not all lawmakers, but there were some lawmakers in the state of Ohio that actually want to go after the doctor that performed the abortion. In the state of Missouri in 2019, Dr. Randall Williams, he admitted to keeping a spreadsheet that tracked women's menstrual cycles of Planned Parenthood patients. I could kind of go on, but you kind of get the picture. Now, a woman's right to choose is critical in this election season because as much as people want to deny it, whether Trump endorses it or not, Project 2025 is very real. And a lot of people who used to work for him are co-authors of this. Like, hell, John McEntee, who was like his right-hand man, helped write the damn stuff on here. Trump has been flip-flopping nonstop for the past few days on abortion and does not seem to have a consistent stance. He says one thing, then he goes back on it because religious figures or people in Florida are going against it. So then he goes back to his religious position, but then he says, but he just cannot nail anything concrete down. There are conservatives and religious figures across the country that want to control women's bodily autonomy, but they don't want to offer any services or want to make maternity leave longer or offer any health care for the mothers, whether they are single or not. And some of them don't even want to make exceptions to rape, incest, or life of the mother. Now, this may not affect men like us very much, but we have to remember, if you can justify controlling one person's body, you could justify pretty much doing it to anyone. So anyway, Tiberius, what are your thoughts about this?
Oh yeah, you had to start with abortion, didn't you? This one's fun, and there's a couple of different levels that I kind of look at this. Let's get the easy part out of the way. Let's talk about Donnie first. Donnie was a pro-choice Democrat for 35 years, and then once he started running in 2015, he suddenly flipped. There's a lot of people who were very kind of off-putted by that, and that's one of the reasons why they put Pence on the ticket, right?
Yep.
Going forward is that he's been trying to hold this weird standard, basically saying it's like, look, abortion should be a states' rights issue. And he's actually moved the Republican Party, at least on some degree, into that. However, it's kind of gotten into an internal fight because there's some people that are, I hate to say this in this regard, but some people who are more moderate who have taken up all right, cool, if Illinois wants to have their terrible abortion standard, they can, but my great state of Indiana, we're not going to do that shit. Which is hilarious because that particular victim that you were talking about from Ohio came here to Indiana to have the procedure done, even when we hate it as much as we do. So I always found that one to be a little bit of an interesting one. So let's talk about like the personal take, or at least, just finishing off Donnie, and then we'll go to the personal take. Donnie's inconsistent because he doesn't believe in it, but it's one of those things that he will not stand up to his own voter base on this one because this is the one issue that he knows he'll get killed on. Like this is the one thing he cannot go up against them on because this is their big issue. There's no other, like, the evangelicals love him. They love him because they got the Supreme Court back. They love him because Roe has been gone. And if he were to actually challenge this, it would be over for him. This is literally the one make or break thing that I think that they could do, because it's the only reason they like him. If it wasn't for this, Trump would not have half the support that he does within the new Republican Party, which I call the Trumplicans. So, like, it's one of those deals he's flip-flopping because it's not his conscience. He doesn't have one of those. It's just his own personal belief is that he wants to be able to have an abortion anytime that he wants with any woman that he fucks. And he can't do that if he continues to implement the laws that's going forward. So he's having issues with it. And, he's just not being honest about it because he's never honest about a damn thing in his life. So when it comes to me, I have always been kind of the fence sitter on this particular issue for a very long time. I used to be pretty pro-choice, but I've actually gone more towards I'm not going to say pro-life. I don't think that's analogous. I would say it's the more pro side. I will take the flack that's like, oh, you want to control women's bodies. Well, there's a level where it's yes. If abortion was it was listed as a statistic of death, and we treated the unborn as citizens, it'd be the number 2 killer in the country. Like it would tie with cancer for being the biggest killer in the country. That's ridiculous. That's unacceptable. I believe that if you're going to have any kind of right, whether it be the freedom of speech, the right to hold guns, the right to do anything, you need to show that you're using it in a responsible way. And as much as I hate the gun nuts, and because I don't think they're being any remotely responsible, and we have more guns than we have people in this country, abortion takes that to a whole nother level. We're killing literally as many people as cancer. Like there's a part of me that's just like, hey, look, I get it. You as a woman do not want the state and the government to tell you cannot have an abortion because it could be life-threatening, right? And that's one of the big reasons I have a big issue with a lot of Republicans is that they want no exceptions, ifs, ands, or buts. No incest, no rape, no any of this. And I'm like, nah, we need to have some exceptions. We don't want to kill mom. And so I'm stuck in this really weird spot where I do want to be pretty hands-on, and I really want to piss off the left on that particular issue, but I'm still not crazy enough to just go into the far right and say, yeah, we're going to ban abortion, we're going to get rid of it. For me, it's not a weeks thing. It needs to be like ethical probable cause. And the issue where I'm going into is that somehow we've gotten into a society where it is actually moral and ethical to say, hey, I can't afford a kid, therefore we're going to get rid of it. It's like I can float eugenics. I can say, hey, this kid's going to have Munchausen's. This kid's going to have Parkinson's. This kid's going to have all these things. I can sign off on that all day long. But when we're to the point where it's just a woman's right to choose if she wants to have her kid or not, I severely have issues with that being a mainstream talking point in this country. I think that's barbaric, and just straight frankly about it. So yeah, there we go from there. So we got in the weeds.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's good to have conversations like this, and people are like, wait a second, why aren't you flipping out? It's like, it does no good, because this is why I want people to get their point across. It does no good for us to just jump down each other's throats. Now, the only thing is like, when I come down to this, right, we talk about, like, a woman's right to choose, for example, right? Say, for example, a woman gets charmed out of her pants by a guy, because we've met all these suave-ass dudes that, say, I promise in the moon, I will always be there for you, and then they get laid, and then they just bounce, and then the girl, like, finds herself, she gets pregnant because this guy said he would always be there for her. It happens. I'm sure it's happened plenty of times. Or those are just, like, those aren't, like, everyday scenarios. Or, like, say, for example, she does everything right. She takes the morning after pill. She takes the, they use, condoms and stuff like that. She still gets pregnant, whatnot. I mean, it's things like that you take into consideration as well. And I think, like, the only thing is, like, when I bring up the whole concept of, if you can justify controlling one person's behavior, you can justify doing it to anybody. Do you think that men would allow legislation saying, listen, before, like, when you reach a certain age, you're going to get a vasectomy, so you can't get women pregnant. But then when you're ready to have children, you can then go back to being normal.
Reverse it.
And reverse it and stuff. Do you think men would be okay with something like that? We would lose our fucking minds over there. We're like, oh, no, you cannot do that. That's the only thing I can really think that would equate to, like, a woman's right to choose, because,
My general thought on that, if you wanted, like, the big compromise, is that like, if we're gonna make abortion, like, hard to access, or at least, like, what I would call reasonable to access, women can basically throw the wrench at men. And what I mean by that is, I want to make it and enshrine it where, if you get a woman pregnant, and she subjects you to a paternity test, if that kid's yours, you do have full legal responsibility yet. She can literally take you for half of everything you're worth, and I have no problem with that. I would rather have that than the alternative, which is the counter that's usually given to me is actually, we're going to allow abortion, but either in that case, men can sign off to just waiver the kid. So if a woman wants to keep the kid, then the guy can just check out. I would rather go the other way. It's like, no, if men are going to expect women to become mothers and make mistakes, then we're going to have to expect that fathers have to own up to their mistakes, and they're going to have to be basically legally bound to that child, whether they fucking like it or not. So I would rather go in that direction than the other, but I admit it. I'm a social conservative. I believe in actually having standards for people and society holding to people to those standards. I don't like this loosey-goosey, well, these people didn't want responsibility, so they're just going to sign off of it, when it's... the reality is that I do not look at a fetus or a child as not human. Like it is. Now, can we say they're lesser humans? Sure, I can float that argument. Can we say that some fetuses and some babies are more valuable than others? I will float that argument too. But there's a level where I have really crazy problems with the inconsistency of both sides. Largely... The folks that are pro-abortion are also anti, like, death penalty, which is wild to me. I'm like, what? Yep. I honestly believe this, and I'm going to be 100% frank about it. Like, when I talk about this issue with most people, I find extreme levels of moral inconsistency and even some degrees of, like, ethical inconsistency. I do admit that this is not an easy one. No matter what you do, you're probably running into some really nasty consequences any which way you go. Yep. If you're generally pro-birth, as I am, you have a significant risk of increasing poverty. Like, I'm not acting like that's not a real thing. But on the other side of that is that like, I have a real hard time with a lot of these arguments where it's just a woman can choose to do this, or it's just a clump of cells, or I mean, the list goes on. I think Stacey Abrams is like the poster child of everything I hate from the abortion argument. It's just, well, if a woman can't afford the kid, that's, whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I totally appreciate what you said earlier, where it's like, you know what? like the right doesn't put their priorities straight. They don't want people to have abortions, but they will do nothing to stop it. There's no contraceptives. They don't believe in that shit. Half of them think that like Plan B should be illegal because it's just a phony abortion, which doctors tend to disagree with them on that part. At least from what I'm getting, they won't fund any kind of like postnatal care at all. We have the smallest maternity leaves in the world. Most of that is by the employer. It's not by the state. There's a level where, yeah, all right, I'd like to see the right put their money where their mouth is a little bit. It's like, all right, cool. You know what? If the compromise is, giving money out to new mothers and new fathers, my stipulation would be, please have them be married, but, at least we can, give some ground on this and say, hey, look, we'll actually walk the walk and put money in the pockets of people who have kids. But that's my take on it. I know you find me a little bit more rational than the other folks.
Well, yeah. I mean, but like I said, I mean, I've talked with people plenty of times, like people that have really strict positions, and like we can still have a rational conversation. I can disagree with them heavily, but kind of going back like into like the video, like do you think like the Lincoln Project just kind of like went a little over the top, or do you think that's something that could legitimately happen? Because like
there's a level where the answer is yes, and there's a level where the answer is no. Mm-hmm. Having the cops be able to just be like, well, your sister is over at a concert, that's some real big brother crap. Mm-hmm. Not to say they don't have the ability to possibly do that, but we're talking about blatant violations of the Fourth Amendment. Mm-hmm. And yeah, your phone is a great example of how they could do that. Yeah. And I'm like, I've been saying this for a while, like the United States for the last 20 years has been needing to have a conversation about an amendment. And I'm talking about a full-blown amendment for the right of privacy. Now, granted, that would have been something to reinforce Roe to some degree. But there's a level where I don't think Americans really understand that they don't have privacy anymore, and they assume that they do, and the only way to actually get it is to legally bind it. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, if we just go with the whole idea that, oh, okay, well, we gave up our privacy because, our phone tracks us everywhere we go and all that, maybe that's something that we have that conversation of too. But I think the conversation hasn't even been started, and it should have booted up 20 years ago. So I'm a little lost on that department. The other side of this is that, okay, when it comes to the ad, some of that Big Brother stuff I'm not with, but there's also levels to where I think the real point that you could get into is it would be the cop knocking on someone's door a week after and said, hey, you were pregnant and we know that you went to Illinois and we know that you had an abortion and we've made it illegal. And that's what Texas has been kind of trying to do with their, proverbial bounty system, is that it's not that they're going to stop you on the way to an abortion. They're going to come out and knock on your door 2 weeks later. And they'll be like, hey, look, we found the paperwork from Illinois that says you got an abortion. And we can arrest you for it because while you can't impede interstate travel, that's in violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause. It isn't a violation of states' rights to say, hey, look, you did something in another state that we don't like. They can do that. It's a weird, nebulous thing, and it will go to the Supreme Court. I don't know which way they would rule on it, but I think there's arguments pro and against that could happen. So that's what I would have actually done is I would have made that argument or that video a little bit more real, where that little girl and that what is she? She's 16,
something like that.
Something like that.
We'll say she's a teenager. That'll work.
Yeah, because I remember like he was being arrested because a child under his care was getting an abortion. Yeah. Right. So she's a minor. All I would have changed was at their house, literally come to their own home, and like that would have been so much more on point for me.
Yep.
I got a friend saying that Kavanaugh has already said that he would rule that as unconstitutional, but I don't know how the court would go on that one because Amy Coney Barrett is very interesting in how she rules stuff. Sometimes she surprises me, sometimes she doesn't.
Yep. Well, she got picked for that specific reason, actually, because like when I read one of the books about Donald Trump, when he got suggested to pick Brett Kavanaugh, he actually wanted Amy Coney Barrett first. Like that was his first pick because of her pro-life stance, essentially. And then when he picked Brett Kavanaugh, he was not happy about it. And then when Brett Kavanaugh ruled against him, I can't remember what it was for, he's like, I never picked Brett Kavanaugh. He was not my first pick. He's the worst pick ever out of that. I just, I don't want to.
Yeah, but he does that on everything.
He does that for everybody, though. Everybody.
Yeah, it's one of the conversations I've had with my fellow. Well, I don't even know if I can say fellow Republicans anymore because they very strongly have disowned me. Is that like after the 2022 elections, where DeSantis came out swinging? He was the only ones only really Republican that actually made ground that year. That night, you have Donald Trump disowning him. Be like, he's raw and sanctimonious. I'm just like, if this is not the stance of somebody who's truly in it for themselves, I don't know what is. Yeah. The one guy who was winning that night, you want to tear him down. Yeah, he can bite me.
Yeah. Yeah, but like the reason why I feel like that video does ring true, because I think about that situation in Missouri where people were getting access to women's menstrual cycles. That is some scary shit. Now, I don't have to worry about people tracking my bowel movements, but I know that's not the same thing, but tracking women's menstrual cycles is a serious breach of privacy, essentially. And I don't think anybody should. And because there are women that actually have apps to help them keep track of their cycle, essentially, and people can get access to it that way, which is also frightening. And here's the thing. I love it when I listen to certain libertarians or people that are conservatives, well, listen, I don't want the government spying on me, as they type it on their phone, on their Facebook page, and then the next day they're saying, here I am at McDonald's eating a Big Mac, and it was you're giving your location away all the time. You're worried about privacy, but yet you put your entire life story on social media. It's absolutely hilarious.
Oh, it's about a voluntary exchange, and what it really comes down to them for these folks is that they want it to be one way. If they share it, it's fine. If they don't share it, if they're saying they don't like gay folks, but they're getting blowed in their own living room, that's you're not supposed to know about that. I'll be real with a lot of people. It's this way, but for MAGA especially, it's a one-way street. It's fine if it's what I want, but if it actually has to go full cycle where I have to show principle, good God, you will never hold these people down to anything.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I didn't want to really talk too much about Project 2025 because that's just a whole nother conversation. But I really do feel like Trump says, I denounce it. I think it's insane. I know nothing about it, but I don't agree with it, but I agree with some of it. It's then why did you say I've never heard of it, know nothing about it, when he knows all these people and he doesn't denounce them, he just denounces the book itself, right? But it's just the reason why I don't believe him, not just because he's a compulsive liar, but it's just because
it's not his project.
It's not his project.
Literally, it's all it comes down to.
Yeah, that's all it comes down to. But also it's because other Republicans I haven't seen too many Republicans announce Project 2025 either. As a matter of fact, they brought it into the House of Representatives, and Jasmine Crockett, love her, she's awesome. I actually saw her speak in person last Saturday. That was awesome too. So, but she was asking one of the writers. His name was Vosh or something like that, or I can't remember what it was. Not Vosh, but it's good God, Votes or something. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, she was asking all these questions about this is intending for the next conservative president. Now, you and I both agree, and there's a lot of Republicans out there that agree that Trump is not a conservative. But the evangelical voters are conservative, and they love Donald Trump because of what he did with the Supreme Court. So even if he does denounce it, I have no doubt that he would change his mind like that, especially the fact that so many people that worked on his administration helped write the damn thing. And the only reason why I truly do worry about what that could do as far as abortions, because I'm a firm believer in this, and I say the same thing for guns as well, right? Just because you make something illegal, it doesn't magically go away. And that's why I'm for responsible gun ownership. That's why I believe being a responsible gun owner, locking my own guns away in a gun safe, But I also believe that there should be some checks and balances in place too. And when it comes down to abortion, just because you make it illegal, people are still going to get the abortions. They're going to travel to Mexico or something. They're going to travel to another country, or they're going to travel to do a back alley one, and you're going to put more people at risk. So it's just how far are you willing to go? But it's just people are saying, oh yeah, we just put these people in prison. Well, great. Now you're supporting the prison industrial complex when you claim that you're all about giving people second chances and shit. I mean, it's just and I understand there's a lot of inconsistencies, especially with the left. Some of us are pro-choice, but we're anti-death penalty. Death penalty is a very, very, very interesting subject, actually, and you and I could just talk about this some other time. But, like, as a whole, I feel like it doesn't deter crime, and there's been far too many people that have been sentenced to death for crimes they never committed. Some of them were executed for crimes they never committed. That's why it's like, it's really shaky turf. There are some monsters out there that I don't deserve to see the light of day, but it's just like, it's more expensive to keep on death row than life without parole kind of deal. It's arguments like that, you know. I mean, but anyway, I didn't want to kind of get off track, you know.
I mean, we've kind of gone in a couple of different circles on this one, but the long and the short here is when it comes to the death penalty, I do share some of the concerns that you bring up. Like, we don't want to, kill somebody who's innocent, but there's levels where I think that, after a certain threshold, we probably know you did it. It's like three people saw you do it kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just like, I do believe that, like, we don't have to do it one for one. You kill one person, we kill you back kind of thing. We don't have to do that, but let's just say, one of these mass shooters that walks into a school that we have on video from like 8 different angles, and, basically, like, I remember the Christchurch shooter from New Zealand where he literally had it on his own video, right? I mean, if you guys want to execute him in the parking lot, I'm not opposed to that. Like, you can skip the jury and the trial and just go straight to the execution. I have no problem with that. But that's, that makes people a little bad, or upset, no jurisprudence and whatnot, and I get it. But, I mean, there's a certain line for me where, like, it just breaks. Like, and granted, there's a bit of that gray zone somewhere in there, like, that one for one, passion of the moment. Like, I'm not gonna, like, kill you back for that. But here's a great example of this. This happened in California back in like 2011, but it's one of those go-to examples.
Sure.
3 guys stole away on a boat, owned by some rich folks. And I don't know what the motive was, but what I can tell you is this. They tied the couple to the anchors and, threw them off. To basically meet Davy Jones. Those people should have been waterboarded to death, and I would have not had a problem with it. But that's just kind of where, like, there's a level where not only, like, what you do, but also there's a how you do it too. Like burning somebody alive on purpose. Like, you're gonna probably encourage me to have a very violent reaction towards you.
Yeah.
I at least outline that. We've got, 3 more topics to go.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to eat too much more time up on that.
I got you. Not a problem. I feel like we kind of like hit the nail on the head as far as like the topic goes. Like, it's something that I'm concerned about because, like, I am all about, like, I am completely against, like, complete control of people, because I feel like, and I'm very consistent about this, if you can justify doing it to one group of people, you can justify doing it to anybody. And I try to hold that standard across the board,
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I've always been weirded out by some of the things that I hear from my fellow righties, particularly when they started saying my body, my choice when it came to COVID. I'm like, we've never believed this. What are you doing? This is their thing. Like, even though you guys say individual liberty, we don't believe in that. We openly tell people you don't have rights to have abortions. We usually tell people, like, we don't even want you to vote at the age of 18. We want to move it back to 21. And then there's, like... I just, dude, the inconsistency of both the right and the left over the last 8 years has just blown me away. Like, it used to be somewhat sensible, but at this point, it's just off the rails. Nobody makes much sense to me anymore. Like, people say they have a principle and a virtue, and that goes away in about 10 minutes. So, yeah, I'm ready for topic 2.
All right, not a problem. Fire away, buddy.
Oh, yeah, that is mine. Okay, let's see. I got 2 examples here. Let me think. Let's keep it spicy, all right? So
Spicy, I like it.
All right, so here's the general take. The Ukrainians have invaded Russia. It's not a huge invasion, right? It's, I believe at best they have like 20,000 dudes in, that's moved into Russia. So basically a division's worth at tops, and casualties are pretty high. But here's the kick line. We crossed one of Russia's red lines. This is one of the things they said. If this were to actually happen with Russia proper territory, they'd throw nukes at Western capitals. Everything from Warsaw to D.C. would get nailed, right? So in the same way that the United States has said, if you cross this line, we'll do something. Well, this is now happening with the Russians, and yet the nukes haven't flown. So I find this to be kind of interesting. I know this is a little bit of late news for some people, because this has now been I think this is week 3 that this particular operation's been on. But yeah, a nuclear power for the first time in history has been invaded, and the nukes didn't fly. And I think that's a hell of a tagline and a hell of a newspaper article, a front header kind of thing where I don't think a lot of people have realized or even talked about the implications of what that means. Is that just because you have nukes doesn't mean that you are going to use them, but also, is there a way where you can use nukes even to defend your own territory and you look like shit doing it? And I think that's kind of the calculus that the Russians have now had to face, is that no matter how you spin this, Russia is getting beat or being invaded by a country of a population of less than a third of theirs. That's about the size of Texas, while they are the biggest country on the planet. And they're supposed to be a first-rate military power. Can't really look like a first-rate military power when you got to throw nukes to defend yourself from that kind of adversary. Western weapons be damned or not. So I think this is a hell of a topic. I think this is a hell of a conversation that needs to follow on. And I know the people in D.C., not alone that, but London and Berlin and Paris are already having this convo. But it's not very public, and I wish it was, because this is a watershed moment. This is one of those moments where either this starts getting ramped up really, really hard because the big line's been crossed now and we don't know where to go from here, or it's like, oh, hey, rules is that everybody else is. You can't just threaten the world with nukes and actually expect it when, you don't follow through with it. So I think the follow-on conversation here is not only one, what do you think about this, Alex, but also the follow-up would be, where do we go from here? Do we tread into waters lightly as we have continued to do so with, I believe they call it like threat mitigation is kind of what we've been doing, or escalation management is what they're actually calling it, or is it like, oh hey, we smell blood in the water, like the Russians aren't going to actually follow through with their threats. Let's bleed them dry, that kind of stuff. So yeah, go ahead. What do you think here, buddy?
Well, okay, so I think this is very, very significant. You're 100% correct, because for the past 2 years, people would swear up and down like that Ukraine was just going to get run over, and Ukraine has been holding steady. They've got support from all our allies, which I think is great, because Russia is a bully. I'm just going to call it for what they are. The fact that they invaded, I was a little skeptical about that, because, it's not because I don't feel like... I think they kind of called Putin's bluff on this, because after they invaded, Putin apparently started calling all of his forces back into Russia. He's like, oh my God, they've just crossed into our territory. And now here's the thing. What they're using right now isn't even the full extent of Russia's military. And the reason why that is because over in... Is it Western? Is it Eastern? I can't remember. But I think it's Eastern Russia. They've got a port city to defend, right? And that's where they keep a large chunk of that military, because they have to protect that, because if they leave that, that's a huge bit of real estate that they don't want to lose there. Now, I'm sorry?
I was going to ask the question. Are you talking about Vladivostok in the Far East?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, they've actually already pulled out most of everything outside of the... Yeah,
Really?
I'll get into this in a little bit, but the vast majority of Russia's combat arms forces are now within theater. They've got scratch forces here, but one of the things that has been a big conversation within NATO is that about 40 miles or outside of the Finnish border, right, which is now a NATO member, is at least a third of the entire Russian nuclear arsenal. It's in a base up on or near the Kola Peninsula. That's where they keep all their nukes for the nuclear submarine fleet, and they basically rotate those out. That's one of their major facilities. You could literally fly in on this place in under an hour, and it's now right next door to a NATO member, and people are like, "Where's the security forces?" They've got less than a battalion to defend this place. Everything has been drawn down into Ukraine, and the reason why is that while the Russians have this massive pool of manpower, they have not militarily mobilized their manpower into a warfare. Mobilize their economy to do that, but their actual manpower, they've not instituted a full draft yet, but they can afford that. But here's the conversation that I can get into. Ukraine is running out of manpower. We do know that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
They've just changed their metrics on who they're recruiting. They actually were trying to keep people who are younger than 25 out of the war zones so that they could have kids. But I believe they now lowered it to 24. What the other bigger issue here, and this is where the kicker is that most of the Russian forces are actually now deployed, and what they had left are pretty much out and about to actually be a real threat that's combat effective, has now had to be deployed either into Ukraine itself to hold the line, or is being deployed into the Kursk Oblast to basically hold the line. And so, yeah, like literally, even though Ukraine is this small country, they are fully and totally mobilized, and it's taking Russia everything that they have that they can put a dude into without a full mobilization of their own to answer that.
Yep.
This is actually a remarkably even fight, which is a little scary. And here's the big follow-on conversation to what we just said, right? The Russians have now depleted manpower in the Far East. They have now demonstrated that if somebody of power, that can be even remotely a threat to them, invades their territory, they don't necessarily mean they're going to throw the nukes. So what's to stop China from taking back Outer Mongolia, as they've been saying they wanted to do for the last 40 years?
Mm-hmm. Well,
change the calculus. Go ahead.
Yeah, but like kind of going back into like as far as Russia's concerned, I think that now that Zelensky and his military has called the bluff of Putin, he now controls the initiative, I think. And I think he needs to set the terms, but Putin's not going to budge. I seriously doubt he's going to budge. Putin is not going to agree to any kind of peace deal unless certain players are back in the game. But he's going to want parts of Ukraine. He's going to want the eastern part of Ukraine once again. And he's going to make Zelensky play ball, and Zelensky cannot afford to like give up anything really. It's a stalemate essentially. Because the thing is if Zelensky, whose people have been fighting valiantly for 2 years, if they sacrificed everything they had, and we've donated a great deal of money and arms to them, and then they actually, say for example, they come to a peace agreement, but he basically gives back Crimea, gives back parts of eastern Ukraine to Russia, he's going to look like an idiot, and no one's going to want to support him. And then that's just going to, I think that's going to embolden Putin essentially, because it says, see, the long game is what wins. Now, when it comes to Putin, the reason why I say he is not going to fold, it's because he knows that it's going to destroy his credibility, let alone the fact that, I'm pretty sure no one's going to come near him. But the thing is, though, his people is the thing he would have to worry about. Now, a lot of people in Russia, they still claim they love Putin, but secretly, I think that some of them absolutely despise the guy because he invaded a country, and now people are getting bled resources. There have been crippling sanctions that have happened in their country. He can blame the U.S. and anybody else as much as he wants to, but he basically did this. He brought this upon himself, and now his people are suffering. The elites in Russia have got nothing to worry about. It's the low-income, middle-class people. They're the ones that are going to have to worry about this stuff. And, you asked a good question. If Russia, starts bailing out and can't, like, say, for example, they can no longer take part of Kazakhstan, Mongolia, stuff like that, what's to stop China? I think China sees what's been going on because right now they really want to take over Taiwan, but Taiwan is consistently wargaming, and I think they're ready for China. China's still building like a massive fleet, but the thing is, numbers, yes, they can account for something, but, however, if you don't do anything with those numbers, it means jack diddly squat, essentially. I mean, Russia's got a massive military, and they're getting blasted to pieces, essentially. Logistics, people do not understand how important logistics are. And if China, from what I understand, one of the war games that took place, if they can't take Taiwan in 2 weeks, they are in serious, serious trouble. And the thing is, like, there's a lot of places that they would have to invade from. There's only like 2 locations they can legitimately invade from to actually like have a chance. But it is so heavily guarded and so heavily, like they would bleed a lot of forces. Now they got a lot of people. This is true, but I just feel like if they were to like be bold to try to take Mongolia, that would be really, really risky because Mongolia, from my understanding, is very, very itchy territory. Essentially, it's a bit rough around the edges. So
Yeah, Mongolia, like, don't get me wrong, China wouldn't mind having Mongolia apart, but the port that you were talking about, the Far East area is, the Russians call it the Greater Far East, but the Chinese call it Outer Manchuria, and it was owned by the Qing Dynasty all the way up until the 1860s. China felt like that they got screwed out of that deal, and there's part of that like ultra-nationalist branch that is part of what enables Xi, is that they want primarily two major cities, Kharkiv, which is basically right there next to the Chinese border, and Vladivostok would basically re-cement Chinese power within the Far East, and it would basically neuter any and all of the ability of the Russians to propagate power throughout into the Pacific. That Vladivostok's the primary naval base for pretty much everything that the Russians have outside of a little bit on Petropavlovsk, believe it or not. And if anyone has no idea what I'm talking about, I apologize, but I'm a geography nerd. Long and the short here, obviously I don't expect China to run. They've largely been using the Russians as stooges here, and I don't think that's going to continue. I think that's going to probably likely continue because they've been basically extorting the piss out of the Russians for the last 2 years. What I do think is actually far more the real option here in the real conversation is this now a time for peace to where, I'm not going to say it's a stalemate. If anything, the lines have moved more this year than at any point during the war. And now that the lines have been expanded to where Ukraine can invade Russia proper, or maybe here, there, and everywhere else, is that this now is maybe turning into a war movement that Ukraine possibly could win. But is this now where I'm gonna quote D Space Nine here for a second, and I figured you would appreciate this one. But right now the cost of peace is probably at an all-time low because now no one really has the advantage, while at the same time everyone has the advantage. The other side of this is that you're probably right in that this politically, any kind of ceasefire is politically untenable for both sides. Zelensky, I don't think, can maintain his government without pushing the Russians out. It's just too much national fervor behind telling the Russians to eat one. And then the Russians, there's levels where I don't know if the majority of even Russians even know they've been fighting a war in Ukraine for 2 years, to be completely frank with you. There's a lot of claims coming out of Kursk that they had no idea that there was a war going on next door from people that have been actually conquered or captured or liberated, whatever term you want to use. So yeah, there's some issues here where the average Russian might not know anything's going on, and what's worse is that the average Russian, they may have to fight the fact that they've had 25% inflation for the last 2 years, but this is kind of normal for Russia. Mm-hmm. Russia's been dirt poor for the last 100 years, so there's levels where this is just day in, day out shit. I actually think, and maybe I'm wrong, that Russia could largely slowly scoop out of this war for very little gain or very little of anything. And the majority of their own people wouldn't be much the wiser. I hate to say that, but there's the level where Russia is just this ultra-nationalist stuff. And like, if you look at like the crap that comes out of Russian state TV at all, if you ever just investigate any of the things that they've been saying, there's a level where if they just get the Ukrainians back out of Russia proper, there might be a point in the conversation of like, hey, we succeeded in our military goals. We're withdrawing, and that's it. And nobody else would even know much about it or any of it. I hate to say it there, but yeah, the amount of information that the average Russian has, we don't believe is actually that in depth. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm rambling, but go on.
No, that's fine. Do you think also, like, perhaps, like, depending on who wins the election, could also tip the balance? That's what I'm talking about, like the players in the game, because we all know that Trump loves Putin. He loves the guy to death. Like, that guy is a sucker for Putin, and he says he loves Kim Jong-un, he loves Xi Jinping. As much as people want to deny it, he loves those guys because they're dictators, they're autocrats. He respects stuff like that. But the thing is that, like, Zelensky, he doesn't really care too much for Zelensky because Zelensky doesn't kiss his ass. That's what, that's where Trump draws the line, essentially. But the thing is like, if I see Trump winning, that could really tip the scales in Russia's favor. However, if Kamala Harris wins, I think it's just going to kind of remain the same until Zelensky can finally bring Putin to the table. And there has to be, it just can't be us setting the terms. It's got to be other countries as well backing Ukraine setting the terms. I mean, because here's the thing. Yes, we are the beacon of hope, but the thing is I would much rather if more voices were involved in this, like we have done in the past. I mean, that's the reason why we created NATO. We did it, to combat the
USSR.
The USSR, essentially. Yeah, that's what it was. It was on the tip of my tongue, But that's the reason why we created this. It was like this alliance, essentially, because I don't trust Vladimir Putin whatsoever. The guy is a professional spy. The guy was a freaking KGB, FSB operative. He didn't get there by being stupid. He is by no means stupid, but he's aggressive. He's a risk taker, and now he's risked a great deal. And but I do think that you have a lot of merit to your argument, saying some people will be none the wiser because they're used to stuff like this. At the same time, though, there have been people that have already protested, but then they kind of quieted that protest down. It's kind of like in Iran, where they had the hijab protest, with Masa Amini. Yeah, we supported the people of Iran that were protesting, but that got quieted really quick. Now we don't give a shit anymore. Same thing with Russia. The Russians that were against Putin, that shit got quieted really quick, and now we're
fled the country.
Yeah, or fled the country, and now we just don't care anymore. Essentially, I mean, it's kind of a fucked up scenario, honestly.
Yeah, so the Donald argument is a little weird because there's a lot of things where I think it actually can go both ways. And I think I've expressed this with you before, but the long and the short here when it comes to Donald is that a lot of people said that Russia didn't pull the trigger while Donnie was president because Donnie scared the living crap out of Putin because and this is supposedly what happened, but I can't confirm or deny this, but there's some people that are pretty high up that I've talked to that have not verified this, but have hinted this is true. Basically, Donnie, when he actually met Putin, more or less told him, it's like, hey, look, dude, you want to do your thing, you do it. But I'll tell you what, if you actually become a problem for me, I'm throwing a nuke straight at Moscow. And that's literally the conversation that I had between them. So there's a level where there's an argument to be made that they didn't pull the trigger because they didn't see the Don as an actor they reasonably could gauge. Because there's levels where they found that he did stuff that they liked, but there was things where it's just like, oh, one wrong move and this guy goes postal on us. Literally, the orange hairdo comes after us, right? And the other side of this conversation, obviously, is, oh, hey, we come to find out, after Trump leaves office, that Milley's reporting that he was preparing for the United States to withdraw from NATO. And this is like the Russian wet dream. So why invade Ukraine if you don't have a NATO that's backed by the United States anyway? There's a conversation to be had with there as well. So is Trump Russia's greatest ally? He absolutely loves to go to the same talking points that Putin has, but I'm actually going to take a little bit of a harder stance here. Mm-hmm. Either Trump is the guy who would pull out largely within the first week, or he's the guy that actually asked Congress to go to war. Mm-hmm. Because, remind you this guy's MO, he's a psychopath and a narcissist. And one of the biggest things that he can't stand is the idea that Putin actually looks better than he does. Well, how do you make Putin look like absolute shit? You have the United States 1st Armored Division roll up on Moscow. And I wish I was joking when I said that, but I think that a lot of people who are like anti-Trump need to really consider the idea that as risky as it is to see a Trump say he's going to disengage, and that's a real possibility, you might see Trump do the exact opposite where he hyper-escalates, and he just wants to take that win because, one, you go to war, you basically become a wartime president with emergency powers, which is scary. So, that checks off a lot of his MO for what he wants to do politically in the country. But also, we know definitively now that if the United States gets into a fight with Russia, it's going to be a blowout. It's going to be an absolute blowout. And the only thing that would make the United States look bad for any president in that fight is either, one, that it takes 10,000 bodies before the Russians surrender, or two, they throw the kitchen sink and they nuke half the planet. Trump's clearly crazy enough to do that, though. So I'm actually far more concerned personally that that a reelected Donald J. Trump doesn't simply say we're staying out of the fight, but actually says no, it's time to get in it. We're going to make the Russians look like shitbags. That's very possible. Actually, something that could happen. If there was another point in there, I forgot about it. But
that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would concern about that because when I have conversations about Donald Trump and my concerns about him going back into office, right? It's because he's made abundantly clear he's only going to bring in people that will tell him yes. Because in the book The Divider, I don't know if you've ever checked out that book. It's 28 hours long, basically. It's a big ass book. So,
sure.
But a lot of the advisors in there talked about how in some briefings that you would have with him, he would cut people off and say, well, I heard this on Fox News, or my person told me this. He doesn't like to read intel reports. He doesn't like to read, period. And the thing is like, if somebody that he trusts, like if Stephen Miller came in and basically undermined an entire, FBI, CIA, NSA, DOD, if they had a consistent basis and Stephen Miller came in and said, nope, that's not correct, he's going to believe Stephen Miller. Why? Because Stephen Miller is a loyalist. Trump has made it abundantly clear he's only going to bring in people that will say yes. He only wants loyal people. That's what I'm really concerned about, because the guardrails were in place last time. His administration was a mess, but there was guardrails. There was people like Mark Milley, John Kelly, James Mattis that were like, no, you can't do this. Even John Bolton told Trump, no, you can't do this. But Trump, at times was like, well, why can't I do this? And they explained it to him why he couldn't do it. When you've got people that say, oh, yeah, you can do this, he's going to do it. He's going to go for it. He's going to just go gung-ho because he was told, yes, I can do this. Because when you had people like saying, hey, listen, Mike Pence can, send the ballots back to the states. No, he can't. That's not his job. January 6th is specifically like an administrative managerial position. It's not, he can't send anything back to the states. But because if you can sell it to Trump, he'll believe you, especially if you're on his A team, essentially. Or in this case, like his B, C, D team. People that he's, you know understand what I'm getting at. So if you have people saying, yeah, let's go for it, Mr. Trump, Mr. President, let's go for it. He would actually do whatever he can. And he will, he insists he's the president of peace, which is laughable because he's not. But the fact of the matter is like, I worry about this because I worry, I hadn't really considered what you brought up, but I only worry that he's probably just going to, entice Putin and tell Zelensky, hey, listen, man, it's over. We're not going to support you anymore. So you need to come to the peace table and just give him whatever he wants. And Zelensky is going to have to buckle. I hate to say it like that, or he might just say, kick rocks, we'll just go out fighting kind of deal. And I would hate to see that.
I would hate to see it too, but quite frankly, if the United States pulled out, I'll be real. I think you might see a very violent response from Poland at that point, is that you may see anyone who's like, oh, we're still on the chopping block next, like Poland saying, well, if the Americans are, calling it quits, then we're going to join the war outright because we know we're next. So we're not going to let the Ukrainians stand alone in that fight. And if you actually see Poland join in, granted, they might not be the only ones, but they would be the linchpin. You might see half of Eastern Europe join the fight, if not even, some other folks join in. But it would be a bloodbath. It'd be the biggest war in Eastern Europe since World War II, and it would be, with modern warfare, it wouldn't have the same troop numbers, but it would maybe have the same level of casualties.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I would be very nervous about that. Like,
very.
Let's be real. Poland, Sweden, and Germany, all of them combined, if they wanted to, they could have a nuclear weapon in a long weekend. Mm-hmm. Like, it's literally part of the United States mutual umbrella that's part of that, but also in the fact that, being part of NATO, they don't have to worry about having a massive, robust defense system because they've got Operation Reforger with the Americans showing up with 3rd Armored Corps to help defend Europe. Does that calculus change if the United States sits away? I think absolutely it does. And let's be real, nuclear weapons are a 1940s technology. They're not hard. Most of these countries have their own nuclear fuel enrichment systems and whatever. The South Koreans have been caught multiple times, actually, refining up to weapons grade, and just people are like, "Oh, sorry, we just left the machine on too long." When it's actually no, they're just testing to make sure they can do it.
Yep.
And I let's be real. I think when it just comes down to it, whether they want to use uranium or plutonium, is that these weapons are not hard to make, and with modern drones, you can retrofit something to have a small tactical nuclear-sized blast on it that takes out, half of a Russian armor division if you wanted to. Well, let's say an armor battalion, right? We could see a severe escalation if the United States actually decides to withdraw, not an under-escalation.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's crazy to think about, and I do kind of dread like what could happen next depending on who gets in office. And, and I'm not saying that, like, should Kamala Harris win, hopefully she does, I'm definitely voting for her, but, like, I'm not saying she's going to, like, settle a peace deal. It's not that easy. Like, people that say, oh, yeah, I could get in there and negotiate a peace deal. Oh, really? And how are you going to do that? Oh, well, yeah, half of these people, like, you got Vivek Ramaswamy saying, oh, this is what I would do. He didn't even lay out a plan. Like, when Mehdi Hassan was like, you haven't given me a plan. You just said you're going to go in and negotiate. He's like, I would tell him to withdraw and stop his arms deals with China. It's like, well, why would he listen to you? Why would Putin listen to you? And it's a very good question, because Vivek Ramaswamy, he talks a good game, but he has no real substance, honestly. I mean, that's just my personal opinion on the guy, so.
Anyone who tells me he talks a good game, I kind of look at with a slanted eye. The long and short here, that guy comes off as a snake oil salesman. Literally, I get used car dealer vibes from this guy real quick. Straight up, that's what I do.
I agree.
I'm gonna have to pass it back to you. We're about 8 minutes over time for topic 3, so go ahead for it.
All right, not a problem. So, I swear I don't have Trump Rangers syndrome. Okay, yeah, I do. I got TDS. I got TDS like a son of a bitch, okay? So...
yeah, go for it.
So, Trump, on the third anniversary of Abbey Gate, for those not familiar, Abbey Gate was where, during the withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, 13 service members were killed in an explosion that ISIS-K launched. Taliban were supposed to be helping provide security during this withdrawal. They failed, and 13 service members lost their lives. Now, a lot of people blame the Biden administration because, yes, it was a disastrous pullout. They blasted him for looking at his watch. Now, I've watched the video a few times. It looks like he's just going like this, not necessarily looking at his watch, but he does have Bo Biden's rosaries on his wrist. But it's bad look. I'm not going to lie. It is a bad look, right? Well, anyway, it's the third anniversary of the service members that were killed at Abbey Gate. And Trump, went to the 2 million unknown soldier. There was camera crews there. That's completely normal, completely acceptable. He paid respects there, not a problem. He then goes to Section 60. Section 60 is specific for those that served in Iraq and Afghanistan who were killed in action. And he went there and his cabinet or members of his campaign got into a little scuffle. They pushed a woman that works there. She's also a veteran. They shoved her out of the way when she says, listen, you can't do any campaign stuff here. Now, Trump insists that they didn't do any campaign work, but if you look at a social media account, that's exactly what it is. And what makes it even more offensive is the fact that there's a picture of him with the family, and he's got his thumb up in the air and he's smiling over the body of a deceased service member, let alone the fact that there is a service member to the right who's also buried there, which he did not get permission to include that in the picture, so that family's really pissed off. But the fact of the matter is he says this wasn't a campaign. It clearly was, because his own campaign put it on TikTok with him voicing over, it's like, this was a disgrace. Biden failed these people. He let them down. It's clearly a campaign video and whatnot. Now, Arlington Cemetery put out a statement. Federal law prohibits political campaign or election-related activities within Army, national, military cemeteries to include photographers, content creators, or any other persons attending for purposes or in direct support of a partisan political candidate's campaign. Arlington National Cemetery reinforced and widely shared this law and its prohibitions with all participants. We can inform there was an incident and a report was filed. Now, the woman that works there, chose not to press charges simply because she's afraid of retaliation. Let's be honest. MAGA has very, very retaliatory people. I mean, we saw that during the election cycle. Anytime you talk trash on Trump, they will call and harass your family and stuff like that. I mean, it happens. But Arlington and the Department of the Army is actually wanting to press forward with this because this is unacceptable, because the campaign was told, don't make political statements about this. And they said, okay, we'll agree with this. But then when they shoved that woman out of the way, they tried double down on it. And MSNBC showed a video where Trump's like, oh, I didn't know. Maybe the parents did this. Maybe it was a setup. He's not taking any responsibility for this. And what bothers me the most about this is I've already seen people doing whataboutisms. They're saying, what about this photo of Obama here? It's not a campaign, though. He's there to pay respects. That's a different story. He didn't say anything political. It wasn't during a campaign season. And the thing is, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if Trump did this in 2022 and 2023 and did this every year, okay, fine. Not a big deal. But he hasn't. He's only doing it this year. Why? Because he is running for office. Now, the parents and the families, they invited him out there. Great. But they don't write the policy. Arlington National Cemetery writes the policy. No campaigns or nothing like that. It's disrespectful, and it's a disservice to those who served. But he did it anyway. Why? Because I truly believe that he can do whatever the hell he wants, and he cannot be touched. So, what are your thoughts, Tiberius?
All right. So obviously, I have my own brand of TDS.
Yep.
But I just despise this guy. I've generally been pretty pro-veteran. Now granted, there's some people who go far beyond what I do. Like, I maybe have donated Disabled Veterans of America a couple times, which, by the way, I'm reevaluating that because I swear they've sent me more stuff than what I've sent. So keep in mind that. But long story short, I've had a lot of problems, particularly in the last year or two, with any vet who actually wants to support Donald Trump. It's already was bad enough when he says like people like John McCain are losers because they got captured. I mean that's a no-go for me. There's levels where it's like, all right, say you disagree with vets, fine. The vets shouldn't be untouchable. But there's also a level where it's just like he's literally just kind of basically said like veterans are losers while he's a draft dodger, which kind of blows me away. And then when it comes down to it, is that when you join the United States military, you take an oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. And we've had a guy who has openly said that the previous election was stolen, has not been able to prove it, and that is still going on now 4 years later. And he has now openly said that he would like to suspend the Constitution. I believe that Donald J. Trump is, if not guilty as sedition, really fucking close to it. Mm-hmm. And anyone who has ever worn the uniform, who actually says they want to support Donald Trump, quite frankly, is a disgrace to the fucking uniform, and they can go out in hell. So yeah, I have some really strong feelings and opinions when it comes to this point, because I don't know how you can take your oath seriously and then actually advocate that this person's the right person for the job. I can't square that circle. And if you want to, that's fine. But quite frankly, it's really not a surprise to hear that we don't have people joining the military when you have, I'm going to say probably 70% of the enlisted still supporting Trump in this regard. Mm-hmm. It's a wondering why you guys are, basically a fish out of water at this point where no one else wants to join you. You guys need to be cleaned out. We need a whole new military if this is the kind of shit that we're pumping out now. You can't tell me you took this so seriously and defend this motherfucker. You can't. I can't take you seriously as a person. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't pull my punches on this one. As far as this being a political stunt, there's always been a lot of lines in what's called the, let me make sure I got this right here real quick, the Hatch Act. Mm-hmm. This has been in federal law since 1939, but basically it prohibits you can't from campaigning on federal property. Easier said than done, right? There's a lot of conversation about if you are within your own office, can you campaign in your office? Mm-hmm. The average American representative, federal representative, needs to raise $20,000 a week to be prepared for their next election cycle, which, I remind you, is every 2 years, right? They need to earn half of your yearly income, or most of your yearly income, who's ever watching this, literally every 2 weeks, just so they can have a decent shot at being reelected. And granted, that's not all of them, but that's a lot of them. And, when it comes down to it, like, there's levels where if Arlington and the DOD and all that thinks that this is a bridge too far, and it's like, hey, look, this wasn't one of those, like, little gray area situations to where the president's kind of semi-campaigning from the White House lawn. This is straight up, he went to Arlington, he made a political spectacle of this, which I definitely think that was the case. Mm-hmm. But, if this is the line, then Democrats need to step up. Fine. Show us that you're the new party of law and order. Put another stack of charges on this son of a bitch. Mm-hmm. Personally, I know there's some conversations about if they want to just look deranged, or if they're going to look deranged or zealous, but this guy is gotten to the point now. He's got 30 some convicted charges now. He's got another 56 on the deck. At this point, I just be like, hey, look, this guy, like, I would just be campaigning on it. Like, to hell with saving democracy. They clearly don't believe in that. What I would just simply say is, like, look, Donald Trump is a criminal. He's a terrible person, and we're going to hold him to account. And this is something the Democrats need to run on. We do hold our own to account. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has now been convicted. Mm-hmm. A Democratic senator from New Jersey, and I can't remember his name, Mendez, was convicted this year. Mm-hmm. Convicted. Mm-hmm. A senator. Yep. Convicted. Yep. We hold our fellow Americans to the letter of the law. Donald Trump has not only been doing the things that he hasn't been indicted for, there's things that we haven't indicted him for. So, by the way, we're also charging him with violating the Hatch Act because of what he did at Arlington. And there is a conversation I've been hearing from a few people where they are thinking about charging him with violating the Logan Act because he was largely involved with some of the conversations with Israel not too long ago. Which is a no-no. You actually can't do some of that shit, even if you're running for office. You have to wait until you're in office. So if it were me, I'd say to hell with it. If the American people want to put in a guy and act like we're just a bunch of crazy people just trying to keep the man down, well, quite frankly, stick it in your eye. This is called law and order, and this is how you get law and order done. We hold people to account. Mm-hmm. And I'll be real. I think a lot of these MAGA-teers are kind of ridiculous because the matter of fact is that there's a lot of this stuff that they think is illegal that's not. Like, they're like Nancy Pelosi insider trading. There's a reason why most of Congress doesn't go to jail for this stuff. The way that they do it is not illegal. You want to change that? Fine. Put your people up in office to fix that. I think you're just making a certain problem worse, but that's a whole other subcategory. But my 2-bit sense here is that I think Democrats need to just show nothing but teeth and claws, and they need to run on it. Donald Trump is not fit for office, and whether it be on the ballot box or whether it be on the stand, mm-hmm. This motherfucker's going down. Mm-hmm. And I think they need to run. I think they need to do it. He's not fit for service. He's not fit for it. And if you guys want to vote him in, fine. Go fuck yourselves. We'll take our shit and go. I'm sure there's a better PR way to actually run that. And believe me, I'm not voting for Democrats this year. I'm staying the fuck home. But the long and the short is, like, if you wanted to get me to come out, like, just say it. We're the party of actual law and order, and law and order says this guy's going to jail. Something along that line. Just run that. I know the business community's already been flipping over to them. I think that would solidify it. I think there's a couple of other groups of folks that you can get off the bench with. Sure, there's going to be a few people that are motivated against you because, the deep state's coming after them. But quite frankly, most of those people already made up their minds already. I say go for it. Just go for it.
Yeah. So how do you feel about the conduct of, I did hear everything you said, but what about the conduct of what he did that day? Just thumbs up, smiling. It's just
number one, it's a stunt. right? But here, like this is just the level. This is one of the reasons I hate this man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he has a conscience.
Yep.
I think he knew exactly what he was doing. It's the same thing that he was doing a little bit with the guy who died at the assassination attempt, right? Mm-hmm. He'll get up with the uniform on the stage and he'll kiss it, and all that shit. He'll put on a show.
Yep.
But remind you, it took the press bullying the piss out of him to actually call his wife. Joe Biden did it first. Mm-hmm. What's more important is he didn't actually call until that night after he got berated in the press for not having made the call. Yep. Because when it comes to actually doing what needs to be done to do right, Donald Trump will never be there.
Yep. Absolutely. It might be my TDS just kicking into overdrive, but it's just like I get so bothered because I've got all these people that, are just, they're so up in arms about like the disrespect that, that they say the left offers the military. And I've seen like Democrats pass good legislation, right? Like this administration has been doing great efforts as far as like getting homeless veterans off the streets, and they've actually passed legislation to get homeless veterans off the streets, which I think is great. The PACT Act, which is something that is dialed into me because now I have asthma from the burn pits. Essentially, that's where it came from. The PACT Act is basically made to where I have the service connection, but now I refiled the claim and whatnot, so that way I can get the percentage and whatnot. But the thing is, though, is that the fact of the matter is that I know that the Democrats aren't perfect. They screw up on a lot of things, but I'm still gonna vote because I believe in a lot of the policies that they've passed. I mean, I like, and this. I'm willing to hear other people out, but it's just like I have yet to hear anybody really defend this. J.D. Vance is trying his best to defend this, but it's so indefensible. The families that was with Donald Trump, they came out to defend it as well. I get that, right? And my heart goes out to them wholeheartedly. But they don't write the policy. And that's something they just need to understand. He can't just do whatever he wants, but he just doesn't care, probably. Because they were probably told about this, but it says, I can do whatever the hell I want. He's like Homelander in The Boys. I can do whatever the fuck I want, That's exactly what he's thinking. But it's because he's never really been held to account. Anytime he's been held to account, it's obviously rigged. Everything's turning against him. Everybody's wrong. I'm the only one that's right. And people still buy into it. But the fact of the matter is when he was asked about this, he didn't even try to say, yeah, I shouldn't have done that because he's incapable of taking responsibility. He tried to pass the blame on to the parents. He tried to pass the blame on to the workers there, the people that maintain Arlington National Cemetery, because this is who he is. He never takes responsibility for what he does. It's inarguable. It's indefensible of what he did, but yet people are still finding a way to defend the indefensible.
To a degree, I absolutely agree with you. There's some nuance there, but it's not in that I disagree with you on the principles of, oh, hey, like he's crossed the line for me a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Just how it comes down to, like, there was a lot of stuff where like it was unstomachable, but I've also had to look at the Democrats and be like, yo, you guys got to clean up your crap. But when it comes down to like where we've been for the last 4 years, he's crossed the line multiple times where it's just like, nah, I can't come out to him. I've considered a Harris vote. I was actually pretty convinced that I would vote for Biden, but how basically I don't believe Harris is actually a good fit for the office. I really don't believe that if there was actually a primary, she would be the nominee. I can't really go down this particular path, so it doesn't really matter for most people anyway. I'm in Indiana. Like, I don't think there's a chance in hell that we're going to vote for anyone on a blue ticket again, or at least anytime soon. So, yeah, it doesn't really matter.
It's doing it again. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. That's the last thing I caught before it cut off.
Oh, yeah, it cut off a little bit for me, too. I got some storms that are building up in my area, so that might be a little bit of it.
StreamYard does it. Plus, Starlink isn't always reliable, so it is
fair.
It is. Yeah.
Fair. Yeah, anyway. You
want to move on to the last topic?
Yeah, just to finish up what I was saying. Sure. For people like me in Indiana, I'm a lost cause. It doesn't really help. But people like me in Pennsylvania, maybe if I'm saying I'm not going to show up for Kamala, that people might want to stay up for that one, because it's one thing bad enough where MAGA can't get my vote because they need me to win. But if I'm also saying you guys aren't strong enough to flip me, maybe that's good enough because you guys can get the leftists to show up. By the way, fuck Palestine. But on the other side of it, you know, I am being a little spicy. But yeah, I'm also like, yeah, you guys could have had it there if Joe was your nominee. I actually was willing to take it, but I was thoroughly impressed with the way Joe actually conducted himself in the White House. He was way better than what I gave him, what I initially expected of him. I just don't know if Kamala is going to bring the same kind of panache because, oh my God, what is this campaign turned into? Anyway, we can go on to the last topic.
I'm on board with Kamala Harris. She's great, and I love Tim Walz. I think Tim Walz is great. So anyway, go ahead. Go on to your last topic.
Yeah, sure. So the last topic, this one was kind of a spicy one, but a lot of people aren't talking about it yet because it's only just now getting into the news stream.
Sure.
Mexico has officially paused relations with the United States and Canada. Now, a lot of people aren't really familiar what that term pausing means, but basically, we what we call in statecraft breaking of relations. This is literally where you just tell everybody in your embassy to like pack your shit and get the hell out. And that you're basically severing diplomatic relations. What Mexico has done is they're like, hey, everyone's going on vacation or taking a weekend or whatever. We'll get back to the United States and Canada whenever you stop pissing us off. So what has introduced this particular topic? Well, there is a massive conversation within Mexico right now to allow judges to be on the elections or to be elected positions. Now, there's two conversations to be had here. Number one, I'm a Republican, is in like not for the Republican Party, but for a republic. And I don't really like democratic measures, and my state's one of them where we actually vote for our judges, and I despise it. I don't think the average person is equipped to be voting on their judges. I think that's a joke. Hell, I'm still 50-50 on if we should have elected a sheriff, personally. So on principle, I don't like this idea, but the United States and Mexico is lodging protest on this one because what they're openly saying, and this is probably real, is that they're believing that this is a front door to be used for the cartels to openly influence the judiciary, because you don't have to have the same standard in running for you don't have to have the same standard in running for these office as you do for being appointed to them. And the general assumption here is that if you are appointed, there's a level where, yeah, you can be more shady because you're not at like being vested interest within the public to check you. But the concern with the United States and Canada is that it's not the institutions that are constantly like getting berated by the cartels. It's the front door. It's people being coerced, whether it be through funding by the cartels or more particularly violent persuasion, to vote for particular people. And it's, to sell the argument on both sides here is that one of the big problems with Mexico was that the party that ran the country for 80 years, called the PRI, basically sold entire states. Mexico does have states, by the way. Mm-hmm. They sold out entire states to be run by the cartels and basically just leased them out, where basically the Mexican government had to get a bit of the cut of the drug money, but the cartels were largely allowed to run free, or at least minorly molested is I believe the correct term for it. Mm-hmm. And so there's levels where everyone kind of has a point in this one, but the long and the short here is the United States and Canada is definitively not in favor of this. They're openly saying this is a terrible idea, and Mexico's like, we're gonna do this, and if you don't like it, you can shove it. Mm-hmm. So why does this matter? Well, the relationship has not been very good for a long time. Ironically, the best relationship between Mexico City and DC was with Trump AMLO, which makes no sense, but it actually happened. Mm-hmm. And now the relationship's breaking down even greater than what it has been in a long time. At the same time, we are each other's greatest trade partners. There's $1 trillion worth of trade that comes across the Texas-Mexico border right now. It's obscene. There's automotive parts, petrochemicals, natural gas, all kinds of stuff that goes back and forth, not just one way, back and forth, across that border, and now the relationship is probably at its lowest point since Pancho Villa. Yeah, go ahead.
So how do you feel like, my first question is this. How do you feel about the newly elected president of Mexico? Because she used to be the mayor of Mexico City, and apparently she was pretty good about, like, bringing crime down significantly from the last, because I actually did a current events on tap episode about her and how this is going to change the relationship. Now, I can't remember who was I talking. Was it Josiah from Pondering Politics? It might have been. But, like, we're talking about, like, the fact that she said that she's going to basically bring in a whole new regime. It's going to be like a whole new state of business. But the concern is that, well, is she actually going to stop the cartels? And based on what you're saying, it sounds like no one's doing anything about it because now they just bought a whole brand new real estate. Now, I just wonder, is she like is she bought by the cartels? Is that why she's still alive? Is that why she's still in business? Because the cartels are very influential. Because for what some people don't understand is that former Mexican commandos, when they leave the military, some of them just get out before their contract's up because the cartels are like, hey, listen, we'll pay you a crap ton of money if you come work for us. That's why they're so successful. That's why they're able to take over serious real estate, because these guys are, it's not so much they're zealots, it's just they're skilled. They are capable of inflicting terrible damage with no checks and balances as long as they get paid, essentially. They're like mercenaries, like Blackwater, for crying out loud. And that's what I wonder is, like, is she on the take, or is it she's just that well protected? So what are your thoughts about that?
I've listened to a lot of people, and there's not a really good consensus for me to draw on. I'll put it this way. Most of the experts that I have talked to have expressed some decent levels of concern. AMLO's administration has actually not been very good at combating the cartels. There's an open conversation about if they've actually been going more of the PRI route, because it was the other party that they beat in the previous election that was actually doing the best work at at pushing back the cartels. Mm-hmm. And when AMLO got in charge, there was a bit of a shakeup in that regard, because basically a lot of people believe that there is a lot less constructive movement going in that direction. So is she openly pro-cartel or anti-cartel? We're not really sure. A lot of this is she's been in AMLO's shadow, or in her shadow. And what's really concerning going forward is that we don't know if she's going to continue following in his footsteps, or if she's going to try to make her own path, because sometimes once you get out from under the guy that you've been following for, you make your own path, right? So maybe she steps it up and where she kind of goes out. She's not in office yet. Mm-hmm. But the long and the short here, at least for me, and how I've been going about this going forward, is I will happily look in and engage with watchful eyes, but I don't have a lot of hope. If the past is something to be concerned with, she's definitely spoken to a lot of this appeasement strategy that the AMLO administration has been giving out, mm-hmm. to where they're just like they're paying lackadaisical. And remind you, during the AMLO administration, there was an active war zone that had sparked out within, central North Mexico, where the Mexican security forces and the army were engaging the cartels in an outright fight. And the Mexican army at one point was routed. So, this is terrifying for me in a lot of ways. But I don't want to sell her downriver before I see, rubber hit the road. I'm always that kind of guy where it's like, let's see what happens, because it is a democracy. This is who the people voted for. And while there's corruption and whatnot, I'll just put it this way. The whole thing that we saw either at the, earlier in the year, or it was late last year, where Dan Crenshaw and a number of Republicans were saying, hey, let's have a bill authorizing the president to use military force in Mexico if needed. I think that was actually a smart play. Keep that bitch on the table. Let it go if we, put it on the table if we need to do it. But the other side of it is that if we actually have a constructive relationship going forward with Mexico, we need that. Because I want a strong and vibrant Mexico that's slowly able to beat down the cartels in submission. And if we start invading Mexico, that means we've given up on that. So
that's a frightening thought too.
Yeah, I'm not going to say one way or another what is the correct way to do it. I don't know. I legitimately, unfortunately, do not know. What I do know is going forward, no matter which decision we make, there are severe consequences for both sides winning.
100%, because I dread the idea of us invading Mexico to take out the cartels, because the thing is that, for years when we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, you always heard the argument, I'd rather fight them over there than fight them over here. If we go to Mexico in war, we're definitely going to be fighting in here, because those guys, they've got connections and they've got people in our country. Like, I'm not even going to deny it. And they're not necessarily like Mexican citizens. They're American citizens that are in this country. I mean, I'm calling it for what it is, because the majority of people that are trying to smuggle fentanyl into this country aren't migrants. They're American citizens. They're the ones that get caught with the most of the fentanyl. That's how many people there are that are in line with the cartels. Drug mules, whatever you want to call them, essentially. And that's why I worry about stuff like that. I mean, people think, oh yeah, we'll just invade. Do people not understand that it will just be, Iraq and Afghanistan all over again, essentially? And let alone the fact that these guys actually are much more well-armed than the Mujahideen in the 80s, much more well-armed than the Taliban, much more well-armed than any of the, the insurgent forces in Iraq. These guys are very well trained. They may not have the religious zealotry behind it, but they are still very religious guys. But they've got the financial backing behind it too, and that is their backyard. They know every speck of land in there. I mean, that's what I worry about. And I'm not saying I'm scared of these guys. I'm simply saying I'm concerned about the overall cost. These guys are just gonna roll over and die. These guys are gonna they've been paying attention to how we wage our wars. The one thing you don't want to do is underestimate the cartels. Because we think, yes, gung-ho, we're going to take care of business. It's not going to be that simple. It's going to be a lot harder than people think it is.
I don't disagree with that to a large degree. There's two sides of this equation. The one thing that they're kind of hearing out of the DoD is that, hey, if there is any place that reminds us of Afghanistan in the New World, ironically enough, it's Mexico. High altitude deserts, basically overlooking hard topography. We've got a lot of experience with that kind of environment. So they're kind of openly saying, it's like, look, pretty much every tool that the Mujahideen, it was the Taliban, right, that was able to throw at us, that's a lot of what we're going to be dealing with in Mexico. And they're probably right? RPG-7s, all, IEDs, all that kind of stuff, that's true. What's more interesting for me, and this is the make or break, is that if it becomes a fight, is who's going to be able to carry the humanitarian day. Because, I like half the time, like the whole hearts and minds conversation is bullshit. You're dealing with people who vehemently hate you. But I want to put it in this regard, and I think this is a conversation the United States State Department needs to have with the president. Whoever wins is... North Mexico and South Mexico are not the same anymore. North Mexico is bolted into being basically an extension of Texas and a part of the American economy. And when it comes to that part of the country, all roads do not lead to Mexico City. They lead to Austin, Texas. So I would say this. If it gets to a point where we think that we cannot have a salvageable relationship with the Mexican government, and it gets to the point where we believe that the majority of the country is becoming dominated by the cartels and is a threat to the American national security, that we need to do something about it, we need to make an overture to the North American states for them to actually join the Union. Or, sorry, did I say North American? I said North Mexican. Excuse me.
Mexican. I knew what you meant.
Yeah, North Mexican states to join the Union, because the big thing is, if we start dropping bombs on North Mexico, we've got a problem, because all the goodwill that we have built out and all of the standard of livings that have actually improved to making North Mexico a vibrant economy goes out the window. But if we can get them on our side, one, it increases our border with Mexico from a 2,000-mile long border to about 1,300 miles, depending on where you draw the line. But we can actually get a better border out of this. Number two is that North Mexico are the least patriotic Mexicans, and actually some of the most pro-American minded people within the Mexican state. There's a conversation to be had here about if they would actually be willing to jump ship. but I think people are out of their mind to believe that that possibility is not there. They're a lot more liberal, for lack of a better term, in North Mexico than they are in South Mexico. They have always been a little bit rebellious. This is actually the areas where Pancho Villa came from the first place, and largely it's because he didn't want Mexico City telling everybody else how to do their stuff. Long story short, there is a lot of options here, and a lot of them have severe consequences. But if we think outside the box here, we can still carry the day in ways that we didn't think we could. Doesn't mean we can't. Doesn't mean we have to write off Mexico. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't write off a part of Mexico. It doesn't mean we don't need to reconsider our wonderful drug policy, among other things else. But what I am getting at is that unless the Americans are going to decide they don't like cocaine anymore, and so far they very much like their cocaine, the cartels are going to be a problem. They're going to be a very consistent problem.
100%.
And yeah, I can go on this one. So go ahead.
No, you're 100% correct. This is why, like, I say that the war on drugs was an epic failure. It still is an epic failure because, we profit off of wars. I mean, for crying out loud, we tried to outlaw poppy fields in Afghanistan. That didn't go well because, like, that's their main cash crop. Because, like, a large percentage of the opium that gets distributed throughout the world comes from Afghanistan. So you're basically trying to take away, like, their main cash crop. That would be like us trying to get rid of corn, essentially. That's a bad idea. Now, the whole war on drugs concept, listen, I get it. Drugs are bad, okay? Drugs. I get it. I 100% understand it. But the fact of the matter is that, kind of going back into the whole prison industrial complex, if people get arrested for doing drugs, they're just going to get drugs in prison as well. We need to find more rehabilitation centers, essentially. And I'm not saying that we just need to legalize all the drugs. We need to decriminalize it, though, so that way people can get help. That's a step in the right direction. Now, I know Portland tried this, but I think they just kind of fucked it up, honestly, the way they executed it. You have to have the systems in place in order to make it more efficient. I don't know if it's gotten better. I don't know. I have to look it up. But when it comes down to, like, Mexico and stuff like that, I do want to maintain good relationships with them. Because they are a very, very efficient trade partner. Because we do a lot of trade with Mexico. We do a lot of business with them. I mean, people go out of Mexico all the time. I mean, as bad as Mexico is, people still go to they still go to South Padre. People love to travel to Mexico. They love to explore the rainforests and whatnot. It's still a beautiful country, but it's just riddled with corruption. I mean, there's a lot of corruption to deal with. And it's not just the corruption. It's got the cartels you got to deal with. I mean, it's a scary situation. I mean, I can't imagine being president of a country like that because that's like, holy shit. Because I don't know if you knew this, but Mexico is actually the #1 most dangerous place for journalists to go to. That's more than any other war zone across the world. Mexico is the #1 most dangerous place for journalists. That's why so many are so hesitant to go there, because of how dangerous the cartels are down there. Now, how do we nip this thing in the bud? How do we fix this? That's a big ask. You could just say, sanctions. It's not going to do anything because that's just going to embolden them, essentially. You could say, oh, well, we could just invade. Not going to help either because then they're just going to, fight us in our own backyard, essentially. I firmly believe that. Do people think we should just negotiate with them? Yeah, we've tried that before. It's probably not going to go over too well because you're going to have to negotiate with one of them because obviously the Lozetas and the Golfos, they're not going to negotiate with one another. Like, there has to be a common enemy for them to side with, and it's probably not going to happen. So it's such a tricky situation. I wish I had an answer for this one, but I honestly don't. I really don't.
I got you. Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, I finally got some water. I couldn't run away and get some, but she brought me some. So
that's
yay!
Awesome.
Yeah, she's a real winner. Anyway, I apologize.
Don't apologize.
I think I made most of the points I wanted to on this one. There's a lot that I have here. When it comes to the war on drugs, is it a failure? Part yes and no. The problem is that, like, I think everyone's right on this one to a degree. And I hate to be like the dirty centrist moderate here, but there's a level where I think there's a level where I can do this effectively. Why are we trying to limit ourselves to fighting on one front? And that's how I feel. Democrats are largely like, hey, look, we need to have a conversation about rehabilitation. And there's a point where I'm like, yeah, there's a conversation where it's like Republicans are largely hitting it's like outside of the moral arguments of, hey, if you do drugs, you're bad. That's changing. One, because so many of them have been affected by the opioid epidemic. But what they are getting serious about is trying to go after the chains of distribution, going after drug dealers, going after cartel members and whatnot that are actually peddling the drugs and moving them. And I'm like, why can't we do both? This sounds like a great idea. I'm not in favor of like decriminalization, but what I am in favor of is like having a conversation where it's like, hey, look, you don't have to go to jail, but you are going to rehab. Like you are treating this as treating addiction as a moral failing and not a disease is something that bothers me a lot. I have been addicted to substances in my life before, not like anything hard drugs. Like the worst I have is probably an addiction to cannabis to some degree, which is a thing, by the way. And yes, I love being high. But, I cold turkey that bitch, so apparently I can do it okay with it. Anyway, it's not that I don't appreciate it, but I have literally been addicted to video games. I have been addicted to caffeine. I know that I've been addicted to that. Like, there was a long time I could not stop drinking Dr. Pepper like I was a fish. So, like, long story short here, I've struggled with addiction. I know that I have an addictive personality, and as somebody who has that, mentality, or at least that, like, susceptibility, treating people who get addicted as immoral really kind of pisses me off a little bit. So, like, the right doesn't win me over much on that kind of thing. However, the part where it's like, we do need to go after drug traffickers, and we need to make sure that we're intercepting the fentanyl shipments, especially the fentanyl. 100%. Double the border guard. 100% okay with that. Have the, multi-billion-dollar legislation that comes out to makes it to where we have new scanning equipment that, we can use on trucks passing through the border. Sure. 100%. Let's do it. So I think there's room to move on both. I'm not going to do the whole Portland, Oregon thing for sure. Like, we're not going to do that. But I do want to reevaluate which drugs are on the schedule list and how they are. Yeah. Moving marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 was a great win for the Biden administration. I would like to see them follow it through now, please. Can you move it along?
Yep.
But there's levels where it's like, what is it? We treat marijuana as crappy as we do meth. They're both on Schedule 1, which makes no sense to me. And I'll put it this way: alcohol, in a lot of ways, and this is a personal preference of mine. And if this comes off as a little jaded, anyone in the audience, it is. Giving me the substance that I can, basically indulge with 12 hours before I go to work and not face any repercussions that makes me mean and nasty and vile and horrible, versus the shit that generally makes me pretty chill and relax and have fun, but I can be tested for up to over a month after I use it and get fired from my job. That's a real fucked up priorities list you got there, America. You might want to look in the mirror.
Yeah. No, you're 100% correct, because Jesse Ventura said it best, right? With marijuana, I've never seen anybody that smoked just straight activity, give them your favorite music, give them your favorite snack, and they are good to go. They are happy. And I've seen that, that's the most typical thing I've seen. But I've seen so many people that get shit-faced and they can't handle their liquor and they want to fight everybody in the room. I've never seen anybody that smokes pot. I've never smoked pot personally. If I don't have to worry about my CDL anymore, I'm definitely indulging, but just not yet. So.
No, I get it. I get pretty rowdy, and I can get pretty like aggro, but that's my natural personality. I'm boisterous, and I'm not fighty, but I'm very much I will stand my ground type.
Sure.
So like I will still indulge in that even when I'm high, but I'm not an angry high. I'm more of an emotional high. So like it will allow anger to come out, but most of the time I'm going to be like, I wouldn't say the life of the party, but moreover, like I'm out to vibe and do my own thing. And if you're fucking up my vibe, I'm not gonna be happy.
Is your cat okay?
Yeah, he's a very vocal boy. I don't know what is going on over there. I'm gonna check on him in here as soon as the show ends. But
absolutely.
Lino, what are you doing, bud? Hey, come here. Oh, okay. So the girlfriend's right outside, and he's wanting to go outside,
Okay.
and we don't let him outside because one, there's 4 dogs outside, but also, he just doesn't get a chance to go out.
Gotcha.
But so yeah,
Yeah. I just want to make sure he's okay or something.
he's okay. He's a whiny little bitch. All right, I'm just gonna be saying it like that. I love him to death. I'm actually surprised he ain't trying to jump on my lap, but he's 17, and quite frankly, he's been a spoiled little boy. And well, just to be very frank about it, the general issue here is he hasn't been told no enough in his life, and it's starting to show.
Yeah. Gotcha. One of those kinds of cats. I got you.
Come here, buddy.
Yeah. Well, anyway, you got another show that you got to get ready to go to, so I think we could just call it good from here, right?
Yeah, I think we're good. We've covered a lot of ground in the last 2 hours, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, do you want me to give me final thoughts or any final shout-outs or something like that before I let you go?
Basically, yeah, if you guys enjoyed what I had to say today, if you thought I was at least interesting, or you want to tell me that I'm totally right or totally wrong, I don't really give a crap. You guys can check me out on my streams, or at least give me a message. I'm on most social media. Just let me know what you think. Just be like, hey, that Tiberius, you were interesting. I got to ask you a couple questions on what do you think about this, or this, or can you clarify this, and this? I'm cool about that too. If you want to tell me I'm wrong, you can just be civil about it. If you can't be civil about it, you will be shown the door. But if you want to, tell me I'm right, I'm cool too, because I've got a bit of an ego as well. But yeah, definitely continue watching this wonderful show with my friend Alex Kirsch. I really appreciate what he's doing over here. And while I don't get a chance to watch every episode, I thoroughly encourage you to do so if you are available to, because people like this need some love and support, because it's a hell of a lot better than a lot of other folks out there.
Yeah, it may not be as sexy and it may not be as flamboyant, but you know what? Some people are good at it. I'm just not good at stuff like that. What show are you gonna do next? What's Doghouse gonna be talking about today?
Okay, so it's a brand new show. It's called The Political Compass, but it largely is based upon the idea that what I was doing there for a long time, where it's like, hey, look, he's wanting to get a couple of people that he thinks are a little more sane and rational to be able to get together and actually have a chat.
Sure.
Because I'm gonna shoot some strays out here. If anyone happens to catch one, well, it was I am naming names. If you got people out there that are like Admiral Gibbs, right? That a lot of people just don't really feel like are all that put together and rational. And while we love them in their way, there's a level where it's like there's a lot of conversations that get thrown into a place that they shouldn't go because certain people are there. And the whole point of this show is that it's the adults are in the room.
Gotcha.
I don't know how well it's going to be. There's a couple of people that I know on there that I haven't seen either in a long time or I kind of question how sane they are, but we're going to see how well it goes.
All right, fantastic. Well, hey, once again, I definitely appreciate you coming on here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope you enjoy your Labor Day. And for everybody, be sure to tune in next week, and I'm also going to be uploading another video to my other podcast, One-on-One with Alex Kirsch. Yesterday, I talked to the chair for the Michigan Democratic Rural Caucus. We had a great conversation for about 2 hours. It's a great one. I'm going to upload that when I get a chance here after this. But Tiberius, have a great weekend. Once again, thank you so much for coming on here.
Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. And we'll catch you the next time you invite me on, which I hope is soon.
Absolutely, man. You take care of yourself now. Ever have a great weekend.
You too. Take care.
Yep.